What happens when Europe must ask Russia to fix the very pipelines it once celebrated destroying? Across the choppy waters of the Baltic Sea, shattered pipelines have become a nervous symbol of Europe's energy crisis. Not long ago, barely 2 years back, European leaders cheered what they called their hard-won independence from Russian gas. Energy security, it seemed, was a closed chapter. But today, Europe's gas reserves are alarmingly low, and once mighty industries sputter and stall. As winter looms, one uncomfortable question echoes through Brussels and Berlin. Who will repair the Nord Stream pipelines that lie broken on the sea floor? The answer is as awkward as it is urgent. At a recent economic forum, a prominent German business leader confessed, "Without Russian gas, German industry is meaningless." Suddenly, the idea of fixing the very pipelines once vilified has moved from taboo to headline news. It is a stunning turnaround. Only a short time ago, to even suggest inviting Russian specialists back was unthinkable. Yet now, political pride is melting away in the face of harsh economic reality. If Europe fails to act, it risks not only industrial collapse and mass unemployment, but also a harsh, cold winter for millions of families. This is more than a technical or political dilemma. It is psychological. Will European leaders admit their mistakes and do what is necessary, or will wounded pride doom the continent to shivering in the dark? To understand how Europe reached this dramatic crossroads, let's rewind to the moment when bravado triumphed over pragmatism and set the stage for today's crisis. Let's go back 2 years, to when Europe believed cutting ties with Russia would guarantee energy freedom, not economic disaster. Remember when Europe believed that cutting off Russian gas was the ultimate act of independence, no matter the cost? In the autumn of 2022, explosions ripped through the Nord Stream pipelines under the Baltic Sea. European leaders cheered, convinced they had shattered Moscow's energy grip for good. Gas from Russia was branded toxic. Politicians promised an end to what they called energy blackmail. The mood was triumphant. Headlines declared a new era of sovereign power, free from Russian influence. But beneath the celebrations, an uncomfortable truth waited. Gas is more than a political pawn. It is heat for homes, light for cities, and the lifeblood of European industry. Factories, bakeries, and chemical plants all depend on steady, affordable supplies. Fast forward to today. Gas reserves across Europe are running low. Prices are skyrocketing, pushing power bills and production costs to record heights. One by one, factories are shutting down. Investment is fleeing to regions with cheaper energy. The economic engine of Europe, the very thing that made it prosperous, is sputtering. Now, the narrative in European media is shifting ever so slightly. Cautious voices admit that maybe energy policy should be separated from political rivalry. Quietly, some admit that you cannot heat a nation with slogans or keep industry alive with ideology alone. What is truly at risk? Not just comfort, but the survival of European manufacturing, millions of jobs, and Europe's entire global standing. If the crisis deepens, the continent could face a cascade of bankruptcies, social unrest, and a loss of confidence that takes years to rebuild. With winter approaching, pride is running headlong into reality. The coming months will force Europe to confront a painful question. Will it cling to old hostilities, or accept help from the very adversary it tried to shut out? As icy winds begin to sweep across Europe, the pressure is mounting, not just in the pipelines, but in the corridors of power. The next chapter reveals how desperate circumstances are forcing unlikely conversations and secret appeals for Russian expertise. Can Europe really swallow its pride and ask for help from the very country it sanctioned and blamed? This is the uncomfortable question echoing through the halls of Brussels, Berlin, and Paris as winter draws closer and the threat of industrial collapse grows. Suddenly, the impossible is happening. The European Union is quietly seeking Russian specialists to assess the Nord Stream pipelines, reaching out through unofficial business contacts in hushed, off-the-record conversations. The Kremlin sees this shift and responds with cold calculation. After all, those who broke the ties are now coming back, hats in hand, asking for help to repair what they once condemned. Gone is the triumphal talk of energy independence. In its place, a tense silence as European leaders realize they may need the very expertise they tried to exile. It is not politicians leading the charge to Moscow. Instead, it is the powerful German industrial sector, desperate to avoid disaster. CEOs and trade associations whisper urgently that without cheap Russian gas, their factories will shutter, jobs will vanish, and Germany's economic engine may grind to a halt. Even as Eastern European states accuse Berlin of betrayal and warn of a return to energy dependence, economic logic prevails. No gas, no industry, no future. Behind closed doors, diplomatic backchannels are alive with secret proposals, technical queries, and pleas for Russian assistance. Energy companies from across the European Union have discreetly sent requests to Moscow, asking for technical consultations, and perhaps for help with the actual repairs. The irony is thick. The same governments that once declared Russian gas a weapon now quietly hope it can be their salvation. President Putin, sensing the moment, mixes irony with warning in his public comments. Russia, he says, is not obligated to fix the mistakes of others, especially those who spent years blaming and sanctioning Moscow. His message is clear. If Europe wants help, it will come with conditions, and perhaps a heavy dose of humility. The stakes could not be higher. If Europe cannot secure Russian cooperation, factories will close, unemployment will soar, and waves of public unrest could sweep across the continent. What began as a battle of principle is now a raw struggle for economic survival, with millions of livelihoods and the very credibility of European leadership hanging in the balance. But as talks intensify behind the scenes, the next big question arises. Under what terms would Russia agree to step in, and how high a price will Europe pay for its pride and past mistakes? What does it truly cost to regain warmth after scorning your only supplier? As Europe faces its coldest winter in decades, the Kremlin sets the terms for any hope of restoring the Nord Stream. Moscow's conditions are brutally clear: full compensation for damages, ironclad security guarantees, and, perhaps most humiliating of all, an open admission of sabotage. For European leaders, these demands are politically radioactive, almost unthinkable. Yet the alternatives are a bleak calculation. American LNG arrives at more than twice the price of Russian gas, and Middle Eastern promises have proven unreliable or insufficient. Major corporations across Germany, France, and the Czech Republic warn their governments in stark terms. Without Russian gas, industrial output could collapse by 1/5, or even 2/5. For factories and workers, this is not theory. It is an approaching disaster. In Berlin, the crisis has forced action behind closed doors. A special commission, shrouded in secrecy, now weighs every possible scenario for restoring the Nord Stream pipelines. The findings are kept under tight wraps, but leaks suggest a grim consensus. Without Russian engineers, there is no path forward. Meanwhile, public opinion is fracturing. Is seeking help from Moscow an act of pragmatic realism or a shameful capitulation? Politicians spar on television, but in boardrooms and union halls, the need for heat and jobs speaks louder than any ideology. Newspapers that once celebrated cutting ties now publish cautious op-eds about the dangers of stubbornness. Russia, for its part, remains aloof. Kremlin officials neither rush nor plead. They watch as European leaders struggle, waiting for a formal request, one delivered with respect, not demands. The message from Moscow is cold, but unmistakable. The tables have turned, and it is Europe that must now come forward. The stakes are immense. Should Europe refuse Russia's terms, the continent risks not only economic disaster, but also a historic loss of political unity and face. The cost is measured not just in euros, but in lost factories, fractured alliances, and the daily lives of millions facing a winter without heat. But beneath the political chess game and economic statistics, a deeper test is unfolding, a test of character. Will Europe find the humility to learn from this crisis before the cold becomes irreversible? The answer may depend not on strategy or resources, but on the courage to face uncomfortable truths. In the end, who will be left to pick up the pieces, And at what price? When reality strikes harder than any slogan, who survives? The proud or the pragmatic? As Europe's winter deepens, not just in temperature, but in spirit, the continent finds itself learning from an unexpected teacher: the cold. Both the frost in the air and the chill in public discourse are forcing a harsh lesson that textbooks never taught. Russian analysts have a phrase for this: a return to common sense through frost. It means ignoring slogans and dealing with facts, no matter how uncomfortable. Behind the scenes, the negotiations never truly stopped. While official statements trade blame, real discussions are happening in quiet rooms. Moscow insists on one principle: any new relationship must start with mutual respect and a clear-eyed look at reality. Through it all, Russia refuses to rush or bargain from weakness. There is no race to repair pipelines just because Europe asks. The Kremlin remembers who cheered when ties were broken, and now chooses to respond with both caution and calculation. Europe's pride delayed action for over 2 years. But facts, soaring prices, empty storage, factories shutting down, don't care about ideology. These hard realities have forced a reckoning across capitals from Berlin to Paris to Brussels. Suddenly, what was previously unthinkable, asking Moscow for help, has become a necessity. For viewers, the bigger lesson is universal. Crisis management demands humility and realism, not bravado. Ignoring inconvenient truths or clinging to pride only deepens the pain. Whether you are a country, a business, or just someone facing personal setbacks. Choosing ideology over pragmatism can risk everything: comfort, stability, and even survival. Europe's experience is a warning shot for anyone tempted to confuse slogans with solutions. So, as Europe's leaders finally knock on Moscow's door, the story reaches its climax. But what happens when those doors open, on Moscow's terms, not Brussels? The final act reveals the true cost and the conditions for Europe's restoration. In the end, winter teaches what pride forgets. Survival means facing facts, not hiding behind slogans. Europe's story is a warning, not just a headline. Once, leaders celebrated their independence from Russian energy, a victory painted in bold words and big gestures. But slogans do not keep factories running or homes warm when reality bites. This winter, Europe stands at a crossroads between hardship and resilience. Facing the facts now is not just about comfort. It is about economic survival, jobs, and political credibility. The future belongs to those who can admit mistakes, set aside pride, and act with humility. Repairing the Nord Stream pipelines may look like a technical fix, but it is really a test of character. Can politicians and societies put aside old grudges when their prosperity is on the line? Or will the fear of appearing weak doom them to even harsher winters ahead? When pride clashes with necessity, only one wins, and history shows that denying reality always comes at a high cost. These choices are not unique to Europe. In every crisis, anywhere in the world, the difference between decline and recovery starts with the courage to face uncomfortable truths. So as Europe negotiates with those it once shunned, the lesson echoes far beyond its borders. The world is watching to see if humility can outlast ideology and if facts can finally trump slogans. For all of us, it is worth asking, when survival is at stake, will we cling to pride or choose the path that leads to renewal?